Good afternoon and welcome to another live stream on Moving Home with Charlie. I'm Charlie Lambden, and today we have another guest who I'm really delighted to have on to take your questions. So this is for anyone who wants to understand how the moving market works and what's different about it in a housing market downturn. But especially I'm here to try and help any sellers spot the warning signs of a bad estate agent and to know how to avoid them and what those warning signs are. And my guest today is someone who actually I only came into contact with through this channel. I haven't had no contact with him through the industry itself. He's been a guest on the channel once before, but back in 2022, I think it was, when John and I shared a concern about where the housing market was heading. Now, John has been an estate agent. He's now retired, but been an estate agent through, at least in his words, 3 housing market downturns. And he actually started his own estate agency business in 1992 with 2 partners. I think it's still there. It's called Waterfalls. During an extremely tough housing market. And he has got stories, which I'm going to ask him to regale you with, from what the market really is like when it gets very, very bad. So we'll start with that. But to begin with, I'd like to welcome John. So John, are you there? Can you hear me? Welcome. How are you?
Yeah, I'm brilliant. And thanks for the introduction. Yes, I've been around for 56 years in one form or another, involved with the property market. So yeah, it's quite a long time.
So there's not much you haven't seen in terms of what a market can do.
No, I've seen everything really from housing markets where you go from 400 instructions, which we had in our office at Manico in Basingstoke, down to 6, and then back up to 600 in a very short space of time. So I don't think it's quite that bad at the moment, but you see fluctuations in the property market all the time. 1992, we had interest rates of 15-16%, and that kind of screwed things up as well, which was probably about 6 months after we opened our office. The property market is hardly ever stable, hardly ever balanced. Yeah. And it's either one way or the other. A balanced market would be fantastic, where you had an equal number of buyers, an equal number of sellers. But when you have unbalanced markets, then you have situations that you have to be aware of. And of course, we've had 12 years or more of a situation where prices have been going up very rapidly, and people have got to get used to the idea that they can also go down. Whether they go down, 30% or whatever, I don't know. Nobody really knows what percentage they're going to go down by. But at the moment, I would say that probably the trend is still down. There are factors that creep into that. For instance, rental values are very high. People have got to live somewhere, so buying a property might be cheaper still for some people than renting. You've got wage inflation. That's taken up some of the slack. But on the whole, with interest rates being somewhat higher than they were, you've got to build into your factoring of the market how that's going to affect people's ability to buy homes. And at the moment, I would say that it's probably going to be fairly seriously affected. That results in prices softening and certainly going down in many areas. It's not the same all around the country. Some areas are more affected than others. But at the moment, I would say that it looks as though things are still becoming softer and softer most of the time.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And I'd like to give people the background here. So you, in 1992, started your own firm, and you went on to win awards, national awards for customer service excellence and stuff like that, which, as I know, is no mean feat in the estate agency. There's a lot of competition for those awards. But the thing that made me want to invite you on the channel last time and now is the fact that I really felt that with your experience, you're unrivaled, or very few people. And Murray Lee is the only other agent I know with as much experience as you may have, from Dreamview Estates in North London. It's very, very nice to hear a rare voice in the wilderness that chimes with what I say about in terms of my advice to sellers on their choice of agent and the pitfalls to avoid. And for those people who can't watch the whole of this video, which we might be here for a while, I wanted to just quickly cover with very short answers if you could, and we'll go into them in more depth later. But let's just start quickly with what I think are the three biggest pitfalls that an uninitiated seller can fall into. And first and foremost, I think that the number one pitfall is to fall into the trap of thinking that all estate agents are the same, and therefore you should just go with whichever one says they can get the highest price. And well, yeah, that's the first pitfall. So, what's the danger of thinking all estate agents are the same?
Well, because they're not. There are corporate agents, people who move around the network quite a lot. You can have somebody that you really get on with, and then they move on to another branch, and then you're stuck with somebody that you hate. So generally, independent agents, you generally are dealing with somebody who's more likely to be there in time. So that's something. The terms of business can be very different, and this is, I think, the crux of why we're talking today, which
That's
is,
right.
yeah, it's the terms of business that there are some agents who will tell you a very high price for your property, and it makes it seem as though the other agents have underpriced it. But then they use a 26 or 28 week, or even a 16 plus week sole agency period to chip away at that price until it's worth what you're actually selling for. And the danger there is that you end up with a price that's actually lower than you could have achieved if you'd asked the right price in the first place.
Well, you very neatly actually answered all three questions there.
Oh, well, we'll finish now then.
because you've said that all agents are not the same, so therefore the choice is important. Because I think what a lot of first-time sellers are completely oblivious to is the fact that lots of people sign up with agents who completely fail to sell their home at all.
Yeah.
And there are sellers who I've said that to certain people who have come into the market the first time. They've gone, what? Yeah, there are lots of agents, and the numbers are staggeringly high. I know that London's two largest estate agents by market share sell less than 1 in 3 of the properties that they list. The other 2 out of 3 they don't sell at all, and that blows people's minds the first time they heard it. So that's point number one. You said so the choice of agent is critical because they're not all the same in lots of different ways. Number two, and it's on the screen down the bottom there, the overpricing and the risk that leads to you waiting a lot longer for a sale for ultimately a lower price in certain markets like we're in now. But even in a rising market, that can happen. Yeah. And then number three, you've touched on the terms of business or the lock-in contracts. And yet again, it's amazing how many sellers I talk to who go, what is a sole agency agreement? What is a lock-in contract? And there are so many sellers who will sign the terms of business put in front of them by the listing guy without even being aware that they are signing a contract that ties them to that agent, whether that agent sells your home or not, whether they're getting you viewings or offers or not. Mm-hmm. There is no performance-based requirement from the agent in these terms, which I find staggering, that mean that you cannot, as a seller, change and go to another agent without being liable for both agents' fees if you leave before the expiry of that long-term sole agency lock-in. So would you just, in your own words, because you'll probably do it better than me, explain to the uninitiated what a sole agency agreement means?
Yeah, well, a sole agency agreement, strictly speaking, is that you can't instruct another estate agent during a particular term. And that term could be anything from a rolling 2 weeks, and some cases up to 28 weeks. So you're stuck with that estate agent for up to 28 weeks, despite them perhaps not getting any interest in the property at all. Mm-hmm. And what very often will happen is that they'll use that 28-week period to chip away at the price. So that gives them the opportunity to say, well, I think your house is worth 20% more than the next agent thinks it's worth. You think, hooray, that's fantastic. And you end up then with a series of telephone calls saying, well, actually, I think we need the market's moved down. Let's try and moderate our asking price and get it down. And eventually you'll probably end up 25% less than than the original asking price, you'll end up with less money, and that's no good at all to vendors. It's like fool's gold. You all that glistens is not gold, and basically you end up with being worse off than you would have been if you'd taken the original asking price or made the original asking price something that was achievable.
Yeah. And yet, no matter how often, I mean, I have personally experienced this with people I know and love, and I've explained to them, as someone who they trust, why putting on at too high an asking price risks a lower achieved price. And they nod and they nod and they nod and they go through and they get to him and they go, yeah, I still think I'm going to put it on the higher price. And they can't explain why, but something inside them compels them to overprice it, thinking that means, and I suppose it must be something to do with the psychology that, but if I don't set at that higher price, then I definitely won't get the higher price. And if I do, then maybe there's a tiny chance I will, and there's no downside to it. I've got to just quickly bring in this chap, Stephen. Stephen says, slightly surreal moment for me. I did a short stint in agency and working, and this is the first time I've ever seen the Durant in Waterfall, Durant in Barclay.
That's so
sounds like a fan. Hi there, Stephen. And we've got a couple of questions starting to come in, which I'll come back to later. Yeah, we're getting some really good questions there that people want to come in and ask you. Yeah, okay. I think again that topic about the risk that putting too high a price on leads you to ultimately getting a lower price is something that bears repeating again and again and again. But what I'd like to open the door up for you to say again, John, is because you just had an article published in the Negotiator magazine, which is an estate agency industry trade news publication, where you went into some length about how counterproductive long-term sole agency lock-in contracts are, not only for the sellers themselves, but actually for the agents too. Do you want to just have a minute to I know we're sort of going the same ground, but it's worth it. Why did you write that article, and why are you trying to get it out there?
Well, I'm writing the article because I see a lot of estate agents on social media saying, I just walked away from a job because somebody, well, in fact, it wasn't that one. I see a lot on social media about estate agents who have lost business to other estate agents because they've overvalued the property, and then they get the property back X number of months later, and now it's worth less than it would have been at the beginning. And so that was primarily why I wrote it, because I see.
I read that?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. So what you're saying is that a better agent that doesn't make you tie into a long sole agency gives you an honest valuation, and that agent fails to win that seller's business because the seller signs up with the agent that gave the higher price and then locks them in. They fail to sell that agent, the overpricing agent, fails to sell it, and when they're finally out of their sole agency contract, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months later, they come back to the initial honest agent and say, oh God, I didn't sell it with them and you're right and I'm wrong and now I'm back with you. But now that agent has a harder job, and in this market also is worth less, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it is. That's right. And very often what happens is the owner of the property is so cheesed off about it that when the higher value agent says that they're going to says that they need to reduce the price, they say no, I'm not going to do that, and they just wait for the contract to finish. A lot of people actually give up the idea of moving altogether, which is particularly sad, particularly if you're moving for family reasons. People might be moving for job reasons, or they might want a larger property. They give up the idea, and then they perhaps put the property on the market 6 months later. But those that have to move, very often they'll just say, no, I'm not going to drop the price, and they end up instructing somebody perhaps who gave them the correct advice in the first place. And I think that is great for the agents who actually win the instruction and sell the property eventually, but it's usually very sad for the owner when they end up getting less than they would have got if they'd asked that other agents or first agent's price in the beginning.
Well, funnily enough, we've just this moment had a comment from someone on YouTube called Exile2828 who says, I fell for the overvaluing. I just dropped the price by 10K 2 days ago. I've only had 4 viewings in a month. I feel bad for not going with the agent that had the more reasonable valuation. I think he meant going with the agent that had more reasonable valuation. This is, and it's Exile2828, just casting your mind back, what was it? How did that agent persuade you that they weren't lying? How did that agent persuade you to believe them and go with them rather than the more reasonable valuation? I'd love to hear that. I've got another comment I'd love you to react to here, John, because we get this an awful lot. Barry, this is a follower of mine called Barry Crump, and he's from the school that doesn't trust any agents whatsoever. And he says, we really ought to dispel this myth that estate agents are professionals. They aren't. They are spivs and shiny suits akin to a second-hand car salesman. Now, Barry, I would like to say to that you are quite right that a lot of estate agents, especially the bad ones, reinforce that bad stereotype, unfortunately, and it damages the industry. And the problem is that I can promise you, having worked with estate agents as my clients for over 20 years, that yes, there are many, as you describe, who do not warrant the badge professional. But I can assure you, and I can keep on bringing guest examples on here, that there are plenty, unfortunately, they're not the majority, they are in the minority, but there are real professionals. And they're not just professionals because they've got letters after their name, but because of their attitude to their clients, to the job at hand, to the importance of it. There are professionals out there, and it's your job as sellers to make sure that you find those professionals and don't get suckered by the guys in the shiny suits. So, John, do you agree? Because if first-time sellers hear this comment below and assume that that's the case, then they're not going to try and find the professionals, are they?
No, Barry, I've never owned a stripy suit or white socks. I put my heart and soul into selling people's houses. It was, for me, it was more than, in fact, I'm in a semi-detached bungalow. If I were, money oriented, I'd be in a bloody great house. It's not what I'm about. And I'm 72 now, and estate agency, I'm still an estate agent at heart. And I believe that the majority of estate agents are good people. There are some, I nearly said a bad word, a-holes. There are some.
It's a safe space, everyone. You can say whatever you like.
There are some assholes in estate agency who I personally hate. And it sounds to me like you've probably come up against some of those people in the past. If you can get a good estate agent, somebody who's actually going to work for you and not for themselves, then they're going to be worth their weight in gold to you. And I'm 21 stone, so that would be quite a lot of money. But I'm no longer practicing. I haven't got an axe to grind about this at all. As I say, I'm 72. I'm no longer an estate agent. I gave up. I sold my partnership in 2005, but I can see the way the industry is going, and I don't like it. And particularly, I don't like this long-term sole agency business because it really screws people's lives up when you can't get rid of your estate agent, despite the fact that you've had no viewings and no feedback, no callbacks, no interest at all. You're stuck with them for 6 months.
It's interesting that you say that, because I would like to ask you a question on this.
Yeah.
I have suggested, not advised, but suggested to some sellers who are stuck with their agent. I've said to them, have you had viewings? And they said, we've had almost none. We've had no viewings for 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And I've said to them, in that case, you need to call up the agent and say, either release me from the terms of this sole agency contract, or I will shout as loud as I can on my social media that you won't, but that you aren't getting me any viewings. And most agents would quite quickly go, you're released. Yeah. So you can, if you are trapped in a sole agency agreement with an agent that's just not performing for you, there's nothing wrong in asking to be released. And the more reasonable ones will. And I know agents who've always said, if they've got a really genuine unhappy customer, they would never hold them to the letter of that contract. So if you are stuck, costs you nothing and risks nothing to ask the agent if they would release you. And if you think they're being really, really unreasonable about it, then you can start to come out with fighting talk and say, okay, you can keep me trapped in there. And every day you do, I will post every day that another day trapped in this contract with an agent who can't get a viewing on my house. And just tell them, because you're entitled to do that. You're entitled to do that, and they can't touch you for doing it. They would very, very quickly let you go if you did that. So I don't know what your opinion on that situation is, John.
No, I mean, it's something we didn't have the luxury of. We didn't have social media back in 2005 and before. So I would have thought, perhaps there might be something under unfair contract terms that you could argue that that's an unfair contract if they're not actually doing estate agency.
Exactly.
So that might be something additional, but I don't know anybody's actually done it. So I can't say that it would work or not. Well, but I think that's an extremely good idea. Social media would be a very effective way, I think, of drawing people's attention to their failure.
Exactly, because estate agents rely increasingly on their social media reputation and presence. So again, I think if they haven't delivered you any viewers at all, you'd have a strong argument for saying that they've failed to uphold their end of the contract.
Yeah,
their contract will be very clear in that they're not obliged to sell your house for you. But I think, and that's another thing, if you're negotiating with an agent who does want to lock in, and they won't budge on the lock-in, but you like the agent, you could push back and say, all right, what's the minimum number of viewings you will commit to getting me per week? Is it, guarantee one viewing a week, 2 viewings a week until it's sold? Because that's a reasonable thing to ask for, isn't it? Because if they aren't confident of doing that, then why are they listing, why are they saying they're going to sell your house?
Yeah, it would be good to be able to quantify quite a lot of things about a estate agency. For instance, market appraisal of a property, the value. Agents tend not to talk about valuations as such, because that's really a professional function. RICS, Chartered Surveyor, would normally talk about valuations of a property, but marketing appraisal, it would be interesting to quantify what is actually meant by their appraisal of a property. In other words, would I be able to sell the property in 8 weeks at that figure? Because if you're comparing, say, 3 agents with one another, then one agent might be talking about selling the property fairly rapidly, and another one might be saying, oh, well, in a rising market, we in 26 weeks' time we could get this. But if you can narrow it down, perhaps when you're talking to an estate agent, you can narrow it down and say, well, how soon would I be able to get a buyer at this figure? Because then when you get over that period, you can say, well, actually, it's not working, is it? It's not what you said you were going to achieve. So I think it's there's a responsibility from vendors' point of view as well to think about what it is that they're doing, and trying to create that level playing field that otherwise isn't available if you don't actually understand the terms of what's actually being said.
I've got a question for you from Kieran on YouTube, who says, should estate agents be required to hold industry regulated qualifications to prevent the issues you've previously mentioned, for example, overvaluing? What's your position on that, John?
Well, I didn't have any industry related qualifications, despite being an author for the RICS. I don't think industry related qualifications are necessary. I think what's necessary are personal values, but that's something that is very hard to quantify until you've actually had experience with somebody.
I agree.
I think it's more about recommendation. Finding somebody who's done a really good job for somebody that you know and respect, and when they recommend somebody to you, then to tell the agent that you've been recommended, because that means the agent knows that they've been recommended, and it puts them on double guard that you really have to look after that person. I know for me a recommendation was really valuable, and if you are recommended, it means that you have a reputation, and I've always said I don't mind what people say about me, as long as they never attack my reputation, my integrity. If they attack my integrity, then God help them, because I will come down on them like a ton of bricks. My reputation and integrity are the most important things I have.
I agree, and that's not something you can get with a qualification or a certificate. This is the problem.
No, it isn't. No, you can't. You can have. I saw the the article yesterday about the Labour shadow minister saying that you've got to have A levels. Well, so what? And there are criminals with A levels.
Exactly. There are, and in fact, the more qualifications, sometimes the criminal, the more qualified the criminal, the bigger the crime.
The cleverer they are.
I think this idea that regulations solve problems is massively misguided, because there are already plenty of regulations that aren't enforced at all. And that is the problem. And so estate agents get away with breaking the regulations, or certainly bending the rules, if not breaking the regulations, because there's no comeback. There's no consequence for them for doing so. For example, conditional selling. I don't know. Did you see that Martin Lewis did a survey of his followers saying, have you experienced conditional selling? And there were 4 answers, and 10% of the respondents said that they felt forced into taking an agent's in-house mortgage broker. 30% said not forced, but heavily persuaded. So, heavily pressured into it, even if not actually forced. But 40% of his respondents to say we were either heavily pressured or forced into it. Of course, where's the line? Where do you draw the line? Because one's illegal and one's not. It's not illegal to pressure someone into doing it, is it? But it is illegal to force it and saying, we will not show you that property unless you take a mortgage from our in-house broker. Did you have in-house brokers?
We had in-house brokers yes, we did. We did have in-house brokers. We had an in-house mortgage advisor at Waterfall, Durrant Barclay, and Waterfall, Durrant Barclay actually is no longer. I sold my partnership to my partner, and he sold his the business on to somebody else only a couple of months ago, actually. But we had an in-house mortgage advisor, and we always took the view that it was a good idea for them to talk to a mortgage advisor, but certainly wouldn't, because we'd want to know that they had the income necessary to be able to buy a property. You have to be able to protect the vendor's interests, and know that the person who's saying that they've got a mortgage arranged actually has a mortgage arranged or has the ability to buy a property that they've offered on. So it's completely fair to talk to somebody who you can trust, a mortgage advisor you can trust, whether it's in-house or somewhere else, and get that confirmation.
But if a buyer turns up with a verifiable mortgage in principle through another broker, then you'd have disrespected it.
You wouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth if they've already got a mortgage arranged. Hallelujah! It's really what is music to an estate agent's ears. A proceedable buyer.
Exactly. This is unfortunately so. An agent like yours, where you basically trade off your integrity and reputation, you welcome a buyer that's already got a mortgage in principle, even from another broker. Whereas some of the big agencies, and the one that keeps being accused of it is Connell's, which of course is owned by Skipton Building Society, are being told there are countless anecdotes of buyers saying, we had a mortgage in principle and they all but forced us to change and go with their in-house broker. And I heard one absolute horror story where they accepted an offer without the vendor knowing, £15,000 less, because the buyer was the in-house broker, through the in-house broker, and the buyer, because of course they get a much larger commission, and so the agent themselves ends up with a much higher income from that deal, even though the seller lost out on potentially £15,000, which they never knew about either, because agents get to recommend offers. Which brings me on to this question here. Also from Barry Crump, who says, are estate agents legally obliged to pass on all offers to sellers?
Yes, in writing.
They're legally obliged to pass on the offers in writing to the sellers. Right. And so I get a lot of questions from buyers saying, we don't think the agent has passed our offer on. What can we do? To which I always say, ask them by email to confirm they've passed the offer on to the seller. And because they've got to put it in writing, they're hanging themselves out to dry if they lie. What would you advise buyers who feel that their offer's not been put forward? Now, I have actually had buyers who've proved that the agent didn't put the offer forward.
It's a good question. How do you do it? I mean, if you can prove it, then I would suggest you go to the property ombudsman and make your case with them. I never had the problem.
No.
I never had to face it. I never had that problem. And,
but you see, buyers don't get to choose the quality of the agent they're dealing with. Buyers have no choice. They have to go with whichever agent is listing the property that they're interested in. And so there are a lot, John, unfortunately, who are not like you of agents. And the particular follower of mine, the story went that they put the offer to the agent. The agent didn't put it to the seller. The buyer worked out they hadn't. The buyer went and put the offer through the letterbox to the seller and said, we have given the agent this offer. We don't think they've passed it on to you. The agent hadn't passed it to the seller, and the seller sold their property to that buyer for that offer.
Well, in which case, the agent wouldn't be entitled to a commission because you've got I forget what the term is now, but the agent has to show that they're an active part of the offer being made. And if the offer wasn't made through the agent, if you had something called sole selling rights, that would be a different kettle of fish, possibly. But then the agent would find it very hard, I think, to claim that they were owed a commission when they didn't actually submit the offer that was given to them by. I had the opposite problem years ago, a case where a buyer went to an elderly lady and made her an offer for a property that I considered to be too low. And I said, sorry, but we're not going to take that offer. He was furious about that. And we ended up selling for significantly more. So that's the only occasion where I can think where I didn't actually submit the offer to the vendor. But to me, that was completely wrong because she would have taken that offer without a second thought. But it was wrong because it was the wrong price of the property.
Yeah. We've got some more good questions here. Okay. Jackie Chandler on YouTube asks, what is John's view on the practice of agents increasing prices and then immediately reducing them in order to show at the top of listings on the portal, she means? The practice is common among big name agents. And you can see this, John, if you have the property log extension on Chrome, you can actually see agents putting the price up and down on the same day, up and down on the same day. So what's your view on that? I mean, you're familiar with that practice, right? You're aware of it.
I'm not. I wasn't aware of that until you just said it. And my view is that that would be completely wrong. You can't. A bit like January sales, I guess, where retailers might increase the price of something in order to drop it. But there must be some kind of legislation that covers that. And no doubt one of my estate agency friends will tell me afterwards that I missed an opportunity to say something. But I can't actually think what the legislation would be. But
I think it's the Consumer Protection Act.
You would think the Consumer Protection Act has something to say about that. But I haven't seen anything specific. I've read the Consumer Protection Act because of my article for Rick's, but I can't remember.
Well, so I know that both Zoopla and Rightmove received multiple complaints from the public and from agents that don't do it about agents that do it.
Well, I would have thought that was a trading standards issue. That's something that
trading standards. They've just said we haven't got the resources to look into this. I mean, to me, it shows desperation. It shows tricking and gaming of the system. I think it's misleading to consumers. And I think when you do see it, if you see it as if you're a buyer and you see agents doing this, what it does, I know that on Rightmove, for example, if you change the price far enough and then back, it triggers an email send out from Rightmove to all the buyers that are registered looking at a property like that. So that's why they do it, because it actually helps sort of re-knock on the door of potential buyers.
Rightmove then should trigger an email when a price has been increased. That would stop that. In its tracks, wouldn't it? If they increase the price, then everybody ought to be emailed and told that the price has increased. If they can email people who've shown interest in the property when the price has gone down, then that should be the way to deal with it.
See, now, if I were a cynical person,
no, you're not. No, I'm sure you're not.
If I were a cynical person, I might say that because some of the worst culprits of this practice of portal price juggling are in fact some of Rightmove's largest paying customers, that might be a factor in the decision why they haven't or they have chosen not to do anything to prevent it. But I just honestly think any buyers watching this, where you've got the property log extension on Chrome and you've got the proof of an agent going the price up, down, up, down, up, down, is screenshot it and put it on social media and show the agents that are doing that shamelessly, because Only locally that needs to be done, because just because one brand does it in one town, it doesn't mean that the same brand in the next town is doing the same thing. But it is terrible. Good question, Jackie. Thank you very much. Here, so got some good questions. There's sort of buyer questions. Here's one.
Can I just say that quickly about that? The thought has just occurred that portals, the new portal, not the new portal, but on the market, Zoopla, if they had a charter or something to the effect that they wouldn't allow that to happen, then that might be something that would put Rightmove on its back foot. When if their competition was saying that they wouldn't allow that to happen, then I think that would be a positive thing. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. Well, you make a very great point. And actually, with my property website, Best Agent, that's exactly the sort of thing that we will do. So it'll be an automatic, you'll get put in the sin bin. If you do that to a property listing, we can code it so that automatically, if it detects a price increase and then a decrease within a space of 48 hours or something, that probably gets delisted for a week or 2 weeks or a month or something like that. So we can automatically inflict a penalty on people for doing that on that individual property.
Yes,
because it is a breach of regulations.
So you should.
Yeah, thank you. Dan Bedford asks a really interesting question. I'd love your answer from a former agent's point of view. He says he's sick of agents trying to get him to sign up for things and get second opinions on borrowing, for example, their in-house mortgage broker, but feels rude saying no. Do I go along with it to build rapport, or am I just blunt and say no?
I think it's important from an agent's perspective to know that the person they're dealing with is kosher, that they're straightforward. There have been mortgage advisors in the past who have said to me that they can get a mortgage for somebody, and then they haven't been able to miraculously, or whatever the opposite of a miracle is. I would take personally. I would always take comfort from my own mortgage advisor hearing what somebody can do, but from perspective of them being able to walk away afterwards and say, no, I'm not going to deal with you, I'm going to go through my own mortgage advisor. I think that should be an absolute given. My mortgage advisor would just check that everything was okay, and then they would they can go through whomever they wanted to go through. So long as you can, really, the agent's job is to protect the vendor, and you can't protect the vendor if you can't be 100% certain that the person you're talking to has got good advice in the first place.
That's a very valid point. And I see a lot of buyers complaining that they're not being taken seriously by agents. And a lot of buyers, I think, misunderstand the fact that the agent is retained by the seller and is responsible to the seller for what the seller wants and protecting them. And so some buyers will think, what do you mean protect sellers from buyers? And I think a lot of buyers are unaware of the fact that there are a lot of bad actors out there, but complete time wasters, total time wasters, just absolute fantasists who will come out and waste your time.
I these days I teach photography to estate agents, and one thing I always start off by saying is that, as a partner in an award-winning estate agency, until I reached the point where I wanted to kill people. And it is exactly that, because you get over a period of 37 years selling houses, and progressively, as started off really gentlemanly. Back in the day, we would take a house on the market if we would take an offer on a property, even though the buyer didn't have the house on the market, and then you put the house on the market, and then it would just happen gradually. But everything seems to have sped up dramatically over those 37 years, and values seem to have changed, and it's become much more difficult to take people's word for anything that they're telling you, and there's nothing worse than getting through to the point of exchange contracts and then finding that the buyer doesn't actually have a mortgage arranged. So the agent, cut them some slack. Listen to the agent. If they say, well, let's just make sure you can get your mortgage, we'll take all the details. I don't want to know what your income is, but our mortgage advisor will keep everything professional for you. And if they say, yeah, he's good or she's good, that's great. And that gives us some satisfaction. We can then go back to the vendor and say, not me now, but I could then have gone back to the vendor and said, yeah, we're confident this buyer can get a mortgage. And if, the terms of our lending is better, then you might consider, going with our mortgage advisor. But it certainly cannot be made conditional. An offer can't be made conditional. There's no way that that can be allowed.
No, but it's interesting. I really think buyers should realize this. You're a seller. You are a serious, realistic seller. You put your house on the market with a good agent. You finally get an offer, and you spend all the months going through to the point of exchange, only to find out at that point that the buyer has not been honest about their finances and can't proceed.
I'm afraid it happens.
And it happens, right? And when that happens, if you're a seller and that happens to you, that is a disaster. It's also the agent not doing their job properly. And so all buyers need to understand that a really good agent wouldn't be doing the basic job they're required and hired to do if they don't qualify buyers to make sure that they're protecting their selling clients, the home seller, against those people who would waste your time like that and waste the agent's time and money as well. I mean, it's agents are protecting themselves as well as their sellers by making certain that buyers are proceedable. I mean, I get a few buyers who are got absolutely up in arms saying, I don't have to tell anyone anything about who I am, and I said to myself, well, then you won't get taken seriously.
Yeah.
But if I let them know my financial situation, they might make me pay more. No. That's what people actually think. Like, you can't make you pay anything.
No.
Which brings me on to this next question, which is a great question. Yachek D on YouTube asks, should buyers make offers on overvalued houses?
Yes, and if a property is clearly overvalued, say you compare one property that's on the market at X% more than another property that you're aware has sold for a price, you would have to look at why that might be. It might be that the one property in the road has got an extension or something, brand new kitchen, that could make a difference. But if it's clear that the property is being offered in excess of what other properties are sold for, then definitely, because there's no downside to offering, except that somebody might say no. And very often, unfortunately, there are people who put the property on the market at 10% more than it's actually worth, because they think that they're going to get offers, and that's typically the British way of thinking is that you think that you're going to get shafted, and so you try a higher price, but and really this is it goes back to what we were saying earlier about asking the right price in the first place, because if your property is on for 10% more, then you're actually making all the other properties in the road look cheaper and more likely to sell faster.
Exactly that. I've got more and more good questions coming in here. Darren Bryan on YouTube asks, what's John's view and advice when a vendor insists on showing their own property? As a buyer, it's a real turn-off and makes me uncomfortable. So this is where a vendor wants to do their own viewings.
I can't think why they would want to do their own viewings.
I'll tell you why. I've heard sellers say this. Yeah. No one knows my property better than I know it myself, so therefore I'm the best person to sell it. I've heard it said.
I think the vendor is probably doing themselves some damage there, because I think that a lot of people would feel uncomfortable in those circumstances, particularly if a vendor thinks that they're salespeople. So they talk about stuff that is of no interest to the buyer, but is perhaps of paramount importance to them. So I would say to any vendors that think that that's a good idea, that that's probably not a great idea. It's really the estate agent, if they're well informed about the property, should be able to do a much better job than you of showing it. And really, you might as well sell it privately if that's the case. If you think that the property is can only really be shown by you, then what's the point in having an estate agent and paying them whatever commission you're going to be paying them? You might as well just, do it yourself. Put an advert in on social media, on Facebook. I'm sure that will be happening one day.
Well, that's a fantastic answer, John. Thank you very much. I'm going to try and rattle through these. There's so many good questions here. TMS asks, how advisable is it to put a time limit on your offer as a buyer, obviously?
There would be circumstances where you might have other alternative properties that you could buy, possibly where that might be something that you'd want to do. But other than that, I don't think a time limit is a good idea. I think you get a response to the offer, and it's either a yay or a nay. That I can't see the circumstance where you would want to put a time limit on your offer.
Well, I'll tell you why, because it was interesting. I was curious to see your answer to this, because I've never seen an estate agent who likes time limits on offers. Okay, and everyone, what you just saw there was a very uncomfortable, oh no, don't want that, because what buyers are experiencing now is they're putting an offer forward. They then know that offer is being used to procure other offers at higher prices, right? And so I actually always advise buyers to put on a time limit, not necessarily a harsh one, not necessarily a brutally short, quick yes or no, especially in a falling market where, as you know, John, I'm sure would know, sometimes sellers just need time to come to terms with accepting a lower price. Maybe they've got to have discussions with family. Maybe those family are abroad, and maybe they just need 48 hours, 72 hours, maybe even a bit longer to come to terms. That's the only offer. And so I always say, don't make it an arbitrarily short time limit. Put a reasonable time limit on there, because you don't want to be just left dangling while the agent keeps trying to get other offers, because that's what agents will do. They'll say to other offers, oh, we've got an offer currently on this. And of course, they can't say that if you've actually withdrawn your offer. So my advice to buyers is, offer your best price first. Don't try and haggle no, but just say that's my best final price. Include your proof of deposit, your proof of mortgage and principal, your conveyancer already lined up, the fact you're happy to buy your search pack on the day the offer's accepted, if they accept it, to speed up the process. So it really is a yes or no. And then say, I do need an answer within 7 days or 14 days or maybe even 28 days. And if I haven't had an answer by that time, then my offer is automatically withdrawn. Not to put pressure on the seller, but just to stop your offer being used to leverage other offers. And of course, as a dyed-in-the-wool agent, you'll be like, but that's our job. We've got to get higher offers. And I get that. But I was just curious to see what you thought.
Obviously, the counter argument to that would be, say you did go for 28 days, within which time you might have alternative properties that you want to buy. That kind of, it's a subject to contract thing that you're doing anyway. You're putting forward a subject to contract offer, which means that you could put forward an offer with a 28-day time limit, and then withdraw that offer at any time. I don't actually think it means a huge amount. I personally, if I have what's called a red personality, which basically means that if somebody said to me, or if somebody didn't respond to me with an answer to the offer, I would say, well, I'm off anyway. I'd be disappearing down the road and looking for something else to buy, because that would say to me, if the vendor didn't accept the offer, that would say to me, well, they're actually on the market trying to get better offers.
Right.
They were given the opportunity to, I would need the opportunity to say, okay, I'll increase my offer. You said you've got to make the best offer in the first place, but best of all in the world, people don't always make the best offer in the first place. But it might be the opportunity for me to make an increased offer if I really want the property. But if there are plenty of properties around that I could buy as an alternative, then I would think, well, okay, I'm off then. I'll go and find something else. So I don't know about time limits. It just feels like an unnecessary device, really.
Okay.
You say take it or leave it.
I think it probably depends whether you are up against other bidders or not, and whether or not you do have other properties you're going to be looking at. If it's a no, I can see that there are circumstances when it's reasonable to say, look, if it's a no, we want to be able to go view these other properties, so we'd appreciate a reply within
Yeah.
7 days if possible.
That's right.
That's reasonable, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Nikki Nike asks, why don't estate agents give the full address and postcode? It's like they are hiding this on purpose, but I find it eventually with hassle, so I can read the full energy certificate, location, etc. I know one of the answers to this. I'm curious to know what yours is.
Well, as I say, I can only go back to 2005 when we always gave the full address and postcode. So I imagine that this is because some estate agents fear that their property is going to get touted.
That's right. Competitor agents coming knocking the door and saying, "Use me."
And of course, those competitor agents probably know the house anyway if they're going to do that. I think it's an unnecessary device used by estate agents to try and stop or prevent or to dissuade other estate agents knocking on the door and saying, I've got to buy for this property when they probably don't. I know that there are other people in the industry who think that door knocking is a good idea. I personally never did. I never had to knock a door. People came to me to sell their house because they knew my reputation for doing it. And door knocking, I think, is one of those things. If an agent knocks on your door, it's a bit like somebody coming along and saying, I can lay tarmac on your driveway. That's to me the feeling.
To be fair, John, I know that there are good individual independent agents now who find quality personal approach at the door. So maybe they'll put a handwritten personal note to the door first, saying, "I'd love to talk to you. I'll come back in a week." And so it's a sort of soft approach at the door level rather than just bang, bang, bang.
The lines can be moved. It's just sometimes I think they move too far in the other direction, and this knocking on the door and saying, do you want to sell your house, missus, is really not something that you want to hear from an estate agent.
Right. Chen Gutu on YouTube asks, what does time of year matter when choosing to sell?
Yeah, really, typically, thinking about the marketing of a property, if you're in the winter, if you've got photographs of your garden, as it would be in the summer, and you can make clear that they're library photos and not just being taken because otherwise somebody will think the property was on the market 6 months earlier. If you're going to market your house in the winter, then it's probably a good idea to get your house photographed in the summer. And typically the busiest times probably coming up for now, going forward, if there's no snow on the ground, then January is, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but you get people whose personal their lives move forward over Christmas and November, despite the fact that those are times that a lot of people are thinking about Christmas, and so they tend not to put their homes on the market in November and December because they're thinking about other stuff. But lives move forward during that time as well, and so what you get generally speaking in January, February is like a logjam that's burst of people now suddenly looking, which is why Boxing Day is said to be one of the busiest days on the portals. Because their lives have moved forward, and now they've got to think about moving home. So January, February, March, and then you've got to think about people going on summer holidays, and so you find that the summer generally gets quieter for putting homes onto the market.
Right.
And then September, October would tend to be busier times because people want to put their homes on the market for them. Of course, the other side of that coin is that you've got less competition in December for people putting their homes on the market. And that could also mean that if somebody is desperate to find something because they've got buyers lined up for their own property, then December could be a good time to put the house on the market because there's nothing else available. The same for the summer holiday months because there are fewer homes coming onto the market then. So is there a good time? Any time is a good time, really. But you're probably not going to get very much interest on it if you put it on the week before Christmas.
this is a really good comment there's actually a couple of comments like this. So I get a lot of questions. Almost every day I get a buyer saying, I'm not being taken seriously by agents. So sometimes they're cash buyers saying, I have provided proof of funds and I'm not being taken seriously. They won't show me the properties I want to see, and I don't understand why. They're not telling me why. Now, Jessica Searle on YouTube says, Charlie says, get out and view, which I do. I always say, if you're a serious buyer and you're serious about moving, if you're not out viewing in the market, you won't know what's happening in the market for the properties you want, and you won't be making relationships with the agents, and you're going to miss out on the opportunity when it comes along. So I do always say get out and view. But Jessica goes on to say, many sellers don't want people who are not proceedable to view. Couldn't agree more, which is why I always say to people, be proceedable when you get out and view. I've never said get out and view if you're not proceedable, and I wouldn't say that. Catch 22. And Jessica says she is buying and selling, and says that I can tell you there are a lot of time wasters out there. And this is an interesting comment. I don't recognize Jessica's name, so I don't know anything about her situation. But I think that some sellers think that a buyer who puts in a very low offer is a time waster.
Mm.
Now, if the buyer is offering, and that's the only offer or the best offer out there, I would say they're not a time waster if they're actually offering, and it's a serious offer backed up with, here's my mortgage in principle, my proof of default. So they're actually they're showing that they're a serious offer. Just because it's less than you want doesn't make them a time waster. Mm. I would agree that if they don't have all their things prepared, like decision in principle or proof of funds, then yes, they're not showing this proceedable as they are. But Jessica, my question would be, and I'm sorry, I've got to let John comment on this, but if you are trying to sell in order to go and buy somewhere you want to buy, are you holding out for a price that you are assuming you must get? Or are you just accepting from the agent, what offers can we get? So I know what budget we've got to then go and offer on other places. Because I think the mistake a lot of sellers make in this market is, we have to achieve this, otherwise we can't afford that. Whereas the correct way to go is, let's see what we can achieve. Let's just find out what offers we can get. Then we can go and make whatever the offer is that we can afford on what we want. So John, what would you say?
Well, yeah, the important thing is the difference in price between the property that you're selling and the property you're buying. And one of the things to look at, particularly if you're moving up market, is that if prices have fallen by 10%, say, for argument's sake, then if you're selling a £500,000 property, that's a £50,000 drop, and you're buying a £1 million property, that's a £100,000 drop. So the gap is actually £50,000 closer. So in a falling market, it's actually more beneficial to you if you're moving up market to get on with the job. But the thing is, if you're not proceedable because you don't have a buyer for your property, then you're not going to be able to take advantage of that. So sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and sell the property for whatever the market will stand, because property is only worth what somebody will pay for it. And until you've actually put it to the market, you don't actually know for certain what it's going to sell for. You can look at comparable evidence of prices. Sometimes you get what's called a special buyer situation, where somebody will actually pay more for a property because it's next door to his mum, or something like that, a special purchaser situation. But that's actually quite rare, and you certainly wouldn't market your property on that basis. So yeah, I think you have to look at the difference, the differential. That's the important thing to look at, not what you're selling for or what you're buying for. It's the difference in price that you need to look at.
Okay. And what would you say to buyers who feel that they are proceedable, but agents won't let them view? Because I mean, I know two different scenarios there. One is that the agent has worked something out about the buyer that has made them realize the buyer actually isn't proceedable, but they don't want to tell the buyer that because it would come across as rude. But other scenarios are where actually the agent's being really bad in their judgment of that applicant's proceedability, and is missing out on a potential offer. I mean, there's nothing here. What's the harm in getting an offer? It's the worst that can happen, isn't it? If you show,
again, I'm so pleased that I'm not an estate agent in 2024, because if that's going on, it just seems bizarre. You to not show a property that's on the open market and is available, unless there's a good reason. One of those that you stated, I can't think why you wouldn't show a property. I really just can't think. And so you need to. What I do, as I say, because I'm a red, I'd probably go around and knock on the door. But I'm sure there'll be a lot of estate agents throwing their hands in the air and saying, "No, you can't."
Well,
do
no, I agree with you, because if you really are an interested cash buyer, which some of the people who've been commenting necessarily are, and you're just being told hard no, why, without an explanation? Why is that? I mean, it is bizarre.
Write the vendor a letter, just say, I've been trying to view a property, but the agent won't let me. I am a cash buyer, and these are my circumstances. Would you like to see me?
I fear there are some less competent, smaller agents out there who have they've overvalued, and they're just too worried about getting offers too low. And they're allowing their ego to worry about, oh God, I don't want to get an offer so low. I'd rather only show buyers. I think one of the things that some buyers do, which is a mistake, is to say, we'd like to view that property. We don't think it's worth the asking price, but we'd like to view it anyway. That's a mistake to say that up front as a buyer. Don't say what you think it's worth. Just say you'd like to view it. Now, once you've viewed it, you're then in a position to form an opinion on your offer. But to say up front, oh, it's overpriced, and think that's going to help you in your negotiations, I think it's premature to say that. Just inquire with the agent, say, I'd like to view the property.
The property is worth what somebody will pay for it. It may be that somebody else would be prepared to pay more than you for it. The other side of looking at it is the other way. The property is worth what the vendor will sell it for. So if they won't sell for your price, then that's the value to that vendor is whatever they say the property is worth. But if they want to move, then they're likely to have to sell to you because or to somebody else who'll pay more. So to say to people, I'm not going to take viewings, or I'm not going to allow you to view a property, that's just stupid. I mean, how can you negotiate?
Word, I agree. I totally
You can't
agree.
negotiate with anybody on that basis, and estate agents are meant to be negotiators.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Great question here from Richard Natris. When sellers know of a defect in a property, should they keep it to themselves or openly disclose it to purchasers?
It depends on the defect, but if it depends on the defect. Personally, I would prefer to be open. I would say to the vendor that I prefer to be open about it, because nothing worse than getting to an exchange of contracts and then finding that you're going to have to start at the beginning. From the buyer's perspective, it means that they've lost a period of time. They've probably lost money with the lawyers' fees and maybe survey fees, etc.
Adrian Novak, on the same topic, asks, would you advise renegotiation later on during the sale process following a RICS survey?
It depends on the survey. You can't. The part of the survey that you need to look at is the final part. If you read everything all through a survey report, lots of the report can be damning, but at the end of it, the survey report will give you a summary of what the surveyor has said, and that's the part to read at the beginning. The first part that you read. Is this report worth reading or not? And then you can go into more detail when you read the actual report. But I've had survey reports in the past that have said that. I remember one where the surveyor said that the roof needed renovating, and I went and had a look at the roof myself, and I thought, what's he mean? So I phoned him up, and this is a long time ago, and I said, well, what do you think the cost is going to be? He said, 70 quid. And by the time, this is a long time ago, but by that time, the buyer had already withdrawn, and because we didn't have internet and they didn't have a telephone, I had to drive up to London to say that this is what the surveyor had said, because otherwise the deal would have fallen through the following day. So, survey reports, you have to look at those individually and determine what is actually being said. And the summary will give you a good idea of whether or not you should be continuing with your offer on the property. But if you've got a serious defect that wasn't known by the seller or wasn't shared by the seller, then you certainly should be able to go back and make a lower offer. But my idea would be to say to the seller, well, if you've got a serious defect, let's get some estimates in for the work that needs to be done, and you can say, well, here are the estimates for getting the roof, new roof, here's an estimate from the new roof. What's your
Yeah.
offer on the property? Bearing all that in mind.
Now, John, we've been going for over an hour now. I've still got lots of questions that I want to put to you if you've got the stamina to keep going, but it's over an hour without a break. So I'll give you just a short break because I want to just make this point, and a little plug for myself here as well. I do get a lot of you, of my dear viewers and followers, sending me private messages and asking me questions and asking me a favor, and could you just look at this and could you just look at that. I am available for people who want to ask me specific questions from a buyer or seller point of view. What I can't do is just, I mean, I get literally over 100 messages like this every single day. Okay. So it's almost impossible for me to start, and what I'm here to do is tell as many people as possible. So if you would like to come to me with a private, ask my opinion on a private matter, there's several ways you can do it. If you send me your question in video and you're happy for me to use it publicly, for free, I will answer your question. I'll use your video clip and answer it in my video so that everyone gets benefit from the answer. You can join my £15 a month private movers Q&A club, which is on the link down there underneath John on the screen there, right down there. buymeacoffee.com/MHWC, 15 quid a month, where I guarantee to answer every private message at some point as soon as I can get to it. But those are the questions that I prioritize answering. So private question, you'll get a private answer from me. Or you can book a one-to-one video with me, a 30-minute or a 1-hour one-to-one video call, also on that link down there, if I can help you. Okay, so there are ways to get my opinion if you'd like it on your individual circumstances. Those are the available ways. So keep the questions coming. That's how you can book me if you want to. So John, do you have a bit more fuel left in your tank for a couple
I'm fine now. Yeah, this is fine. I'm happy to stick around for a while.
Fantastic. Okay, guys.
I'm an old man. The loo might call later on.
Listen, if you need to, that's absolutely fine. If you need to take a break for the loo, no problem. I can keep this going. I'll do a little tap dance for a few minutes while and guys, by the way, there are lots of you asking questions that are great questions, but they're not relevant to today's topic, which is really about helping sellers avoid pitfalls. So I am picking the questions that I think are most relevant to today's topic and also will be the most helpful to the most number of people out there. But actually, there are a lot of the 270 of you watching this live, not including anyone who's watching on X. And my next question, therefore, is... so XR2828 is another seller, and I realize this is a bit of a piece of string question. It says, what is the average number of viewings and expected time from listing to get an accepted offer? I'll let you take that, John.
Well, it depends on the market. Yes.
Well, it depends on the asking price, I think.
Yeah, I know it's extended significantly of recent. There was a time when houses were coming onto the market and selling before, going back to 1973, when we were down to 6 houses. Very often I'd go out and photograph a house with my Polaroid camera and my Burton suit. And I'd have, the sticky stuff from the Polaroid under my armpits. And by the time I got back to the office, there was already an offer on it because they spotted an estate agent. And they were desperate to buy a house in that particular road. And so they phoned all the estate agents. So it depends entirely on the market. But I can only tell you that I'm reading that it's taking longer now to get an offer.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if you would have 20 or 30 viewings on a property at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised, but I can't say that that's a fact. And therefore, you're probably looking at 2 or 3 weeks.
I've got some official data I can share right here. Actually.
Okay, good for it.
On that particular question. So this is Rightmove's most recent one. Average time to secure a buyer, average, is 71 days currently. And that's the highest in the last couple of years. And I think will continue to trend upwards. But guys, that is misleading because there's no such thing as an average transaction. And what I would say is the lower you set your asking price, the faster you will get competing bidders. And the faster you get competing bidders, the faster you will discover the highest price that is going to be offered for your home and be able to choose whether to accept it or not. Now, Perry Power said on the live stream last week that he says if you haven't got your house under offer in 28 days, there's a problem either with the price or with the property, or
Yes.
both.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And that's the point that I made in that article that was published, that the longer you take to before the penny drops, that you've been had by agents who suggest a much higher price than the property is actually going to sell for, the longer you take, the more you lose. So when prices are dropping, you really have to be on the ball. And if you're not getting viewings in, say, 2 weeks, and then there is something very, very wrong. And certainly if you didn't have an offer in 28 days, then you'd be up the creek without a paddle.
Which is why you shouldn't agree to a long-term sole agency contract. I think for an agent to, if I was an agent, I would say, give me 4 weeks followed by 2 weeks rolling notice.
Yeah. Well, we always operated on a 2 week rolling notice from day one. So arguably you could say if somebody on the second day wanted to give us a sack, they could do that by giving us 2 weeks notice. And that was because we had confidence in the service that we were offering, that we would be able to perform, that we'd get viewers on the property. If we didn't, then they would have every right to turn around to us and say, no, we're going to try somewhere else. And that's the fairest way to operate. And if you've got that element of trust between the client and you, then you've got something that's really valuable. And
absolutely right. That's the most. I often say to people that the most important factor in your choice of agent is the working relationship between you. How good a team are you? Because it is a team effort, especially in a difficult market. Lisa Woods has got a great question. Any advice on approach, what to say, do, or general attitude that works in order to reassure estate agents that we are proceedable? Bring a bank statement, feel free to be super positive. So again, I think as a buyer, she's struggling to get estate agents to believe that she's proceedable.
I find that really bizarre in this market where we're actually saying that that there are more properties around than proceedable buyers at the moment. I don't understand. Honestly, I really don't understand. Sorry, what was the lady's name?
Lisa Woods.
Is Lisa? She's not broadcasting that she's going to make a low offer on a property before she goes to the property, or giving them another reason for not
I don't know. I think I've messaged her on X. I think I remember saying exactly that. Don't go in saying, well, I won't be offering anywhere near asking price, because that won't help you.
Yeah, no, don't do that. I mean, you want to get in there, and if the property is suitable for you, and make an offer of what you think is appropriate for the property, but do that once you've actually had a view. There's no point in saying that something that you haven't actually viewed isn't going to be worth the money that you're going to be offering, or isn't worth the money. Then what's the point in? You can't know what the property's like until you've seen it.
Lisa is watching. She's live, and she said she's just made an offer just under asking price.
Well, so she has viewed the property then.
Yeah.
Okay, but she has viewed the property, but it must have been another property that she wasn't able to view.
I think she's actually saying she's trying to get the agent to believe her proceedability. How well? So Lisa, I would ask you, has the agent asked you for your proof of funds? Have they asked you those questions yet? Because I would also always, with your offer, that's why I have my offer template, volunteer your evidence of your mortgage and principal, your proof of deposit or cash buying, the fact you've got conveyancer lined up. All of these things demonstrate commitment and knowledge of the process and make your offer more likely to be recommended by the agent.
Well, I mean, if she's got all those things, then the agent would need a brain transplant not to take her seriously.
No, so okay, so she's just said it's not an official offer. Okay, all right. Okay. Then if you haven't made an official offer, if it's like if it's a vague offer, they're probably thinking that you're not that keen on it. So they're waiting to show that you really are that keen.
If she wants to phone me after, you can, give her my phone number after. If she wants to phone me, and I'm happy to chat through that one with her, because I don't understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lisa, you can find, actually, I put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the description below the video here. So if you want to reach out to John via LinkedIn, Lisa, he's very kind enough to help. I'll definitely be bringing cash proof next time. Good. So this is a really important question that a seller has just asked, recent to the. So, Mr. Stewie Louie, I think that says. Unfortunately, I've just found your channel. I've been with one estate agent November to December and now a new one this month. We now realized they priced up to get our business. What should we do?
Sorry, and how long is the sole agency contract?
Right, so we don't know that. So Stewie, have you signed a contract with them, and how long have you signed in for? But my first response to that would be, you decide on the price. You can ring up your agent right now and instruct them to lower the price to whatever they think would be the best price to elicit viewings and offers the soonest. Actually, yeah. John, that reminds me of the point you made before we came on air about the question that vendors should be asking agents in that marketing appraisal process about how much do you think it's worth? It's like, what is the price that is going to get the offers? Was it you? Maybe I was talking to someone else about that. I'm not sure.
No, you should be asking agents all sorts of questions before you instruct an agent. One that I'm primarily interested in is the quality of their marketing, because you can make a £60,000 kitchen look like the lower deck of Noah's Ark after a nasty storm. If you don't know what you're doing with the camera, and that kind of thing is really important. So a lot of estate agents will hire professional photographers. That's good if they are truly professional. I've actually taught some photographers who've been going out on behalf of large companies who are said to be professional, but they're actually using their telephones to take the photos. So they're not professional. The only professionalism there is that they're getting paid. So look at the quality of their photography. That's very, very important, because that's
Stewie Louis just answered. He's signed a 12-week sole agency.
Well, the problem there is that if you phone the agent and reduce the asking price to something that's more realistic, you're in a way rewarding the agent. But on the other hand, if the prices are continuing to fall, you were talking about the number of businesses that are going into receivership at the moment. If prices are continuing to fall, then you arguably will end up with less money if you don't do that. But it's a shame that you're rewarding the estate agent who is,
Look at Stewie's comment. New estate agents said that our old estate agents were rubbish. They then sent round the same photographer.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, what can I say? I don't know. I mean, it's a shame, but as I say, there are good estate agents. There really. And I know many of them. They're really good guys, and they want to do a good job. But unfortunately, as I said before, there are some arseholes in it as well. And you've got to be, I don't know about qualifications, but I do think licensing probably should come into the equation somewhere. That licensing estate agents is probably a good thing to do. The threat of losing a license if they mess around with people's lives the way that they do, those agents do. I think that would help to level the playing field, so that you don't get one estate agent saying, well, your property is worth X, and the other agent saying it's worth 10-20% more, and basically lying to get the business. And that to me is what's wrong with the profession. It's one of the reasons that the estate agency's got such a rotten reputation. Why people like Barry said earlier that estate agents aren't professionals.
So first of all, John, you've just got a bit of a fan there. Look in the comments on the screen there. John is a legend. Thank
you very much.
Which is very kind of you, Nick. Stewie says, actually, this is more relevant information. We are hopefully buying a house through our current estate agents too. So what's happened is that they've inquired with that agent on a house to buy, and they've used that applicant inquiry to pinch his instruction from their competitor agent, signed you up to 12 weeks. Stewie, I would say this: you are the client, you are the boss of that relationship. Without breaching whatever terms you may have signed in the sole agency agreement for 12 weeks, you can now start to say, I want to price my house as attractively as possible in comparison to all the other stuff that's like mine on the market, so that mine looks like it's better value, so we can see what offers come in and get it under offer. And if you can find other homes like yours that look better in their marketing, you can I would insist on having the photographs redone by a better photographer.
One of the things that an opportunity there is that if the person is hopefully buying through this particular estate agent, you can assume that they might have applied more of a generous price to the property that they're hoping to buy as well. So you could say, well, look, it's clear we're getting no interest in our property at whatever it is. And it's likely that we're going to have to reduce our price by X%. So we could do that and perhaps get interest in our property if we were to do that, but we would expect the same percentage reduction on the property that we're hoping to buy. So I think that that's an opportunity if you're buying through that estate agent, and they can see, you're not selling through your first estate agent, so that estate agent has the opportunity to get 2 sales, and it's in their interest, it's in their vendor's interest to make sure that that you find a buyer for your property, unless they've got other interests in that property. Then there isn't really an argument for not doing that.
Right, listen, I'm going to say that I'd like to start to wrap this up, bring it to an end. We've got an hour and 20 minutes now. And what I'd like to do, John, is I'd like to recap the 3 pitfalls, the 3 traps sellers can fall into, particularly in a downturn. And I wondered if actually you would I meant to ask you this at the beginning, but could you just paint a picture for our younger viewers who've not experienced a proper recession, like the only one I experienced personally as an adult was the 90s one, and what the housing market can look like in a recession? Because given today's news, just out from the insolvency service, that we've had a greater number of company failures than at any time since the early 90s, I think, although there are many different conditions now, and hopefully there won't be nearly as many repossessions as there were in the 90s, and for people who've only ever seen a housing market where it's just up, busy, what can it look like when it goes wrong? What was it like? I mean, what was the reality like of the market when you had 600 instructions on your books?
Okay, so I was a young estate agent, probably 22, and we'd gone through a period of probably 12 months where we had only 6 houses to sell at any one time. And so when people came to us to put their houses on the market, we would take them on at virtually any price, because it seemed to us that it was a bit like Christmas. You were suddenly finding that you were, there's another instruction, and they all piled in into the market at the same time. But the consequence of everybody piling in at any price was that suddenly there were too many properties, and you hear this phrase "supply and demand" bandied around. Well, we had an oversupply of really overpriced properties, and they weren't selling, and because of that, it was just piling on top of each, and it became very difficult. I don't know that we're going to see the same now as we saw back then. I think that was probably the worst scenario that we ever had.
Which one was that? What year?
1973. 1973. We had a Middle East war. We had John Barber, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who basically had overinflated the economy, and because of that, interest rates started going up, and it was just an awful
Sorry,
mess.
did you say 1973 or 2023? Because you
73.
said Middle East conflict, high interest rates, and a chancellor who'd overheated the economy.
Yeah,
that sounds like an almost carbon copy of what we've got now.
Yeah, which is why I was writing about this 2.5 years ago and saying that we've got a bit of a disaster around the corner. Unfortunately, Rishi, with his probably well-intended stamp duty holiday, stamp duty holiday, he overinflated property prices without any question of doubt, and I knew at the time that was going to happen. And I wrote about it. I wrote to 1 or 2 people and said, your influencers, are you going to say anything about this? Because what actually happened with the stamp duty holiday was that he put a date limit on it, which basically meant that anybody who was going to move or had planned to move 6 months down the line after that date limit, suddenly thought to themselves, well, I'll have some of that. I'll sell my house now. And so you had all of these houses, coming onto the market, but buyers wanting to take advantage of the stamp duty holiday. But 6 months down the line, you had a vacuum where no houses were coming on. And that meant that, you had this shortage of supply, and that was what actually fueled the price rise that we saw in the following 2.5 years. And it messed with the natural order of things. We have circumstances today like very high rental values, and people have got to live somewhere. So the opportunity for people is either to buy something or to rent or to live with mum and dad, and there aren't that many people who would want to carry on living with mum and dad for longer than they need to. And so with very high rental values, and perhaps 30 people for every rental property that comes onto the market around where we live in Surrey, there isn't much opportunity for people to do other than to buy. And so what's happening, I think, at the moment is that you're finding that people are going to be spending less on holidays, less on eating out, less on entertainment, and all that kind of stuff. So you'll expect to see the hospitality industries, I think, not faring too well in the coming months.
Hospitality UK says that 2024 was the worst start to a year they've had in over 25 years, and it's going to get worse. I mean, you had houses sitting on the shelf, piling high, and no buyers.
It was an absolute disaster. It got to the point where the estate agency I was working for at the time said, you've got to disinstruct yourselves. So we took all these houses on, and we had all the costs and expense of putting these houses onto the market. And then we had to phone the vendors and say, unless you drop your price, we're going to have to take your house off the market. Hundreds of them.
And do you think we're about to see that yet? I mean, have we had the bleep moment that you and I discussed? Do you think agents have yet?
I think we're going through that at the moment, but I don't think it's going to be as severe because people have to live somewhere, and because rental values are so high. Sorry, that's my cat scratching. Rental values are so high, and also we've had a bit of wage inflation as well. So that's actually helped people. But if more and more businesses are going out of business, then there is a danger around the corner that we will, if we're starting to see, more repossessions, etc., then that's going to be a sign that we're going to have to do something. Sorry, he's come to say hello.
Right. If you are a seller, we've had a seller just actually ask a question in the comments now. But so just to recap, because this video was primarily aimed at sellers. Your choice of agent is crucial because a good agent will get your home sold for whatever the best price the market will support in a sensible period of time. A bad agent will lock you into a 6-month contract and leave you on the shelf gathering dust and not sell while the market.
That's a sign. If your estate agent says, here's a long-term sold agency contract, then start asking a lot of questions. Why is it going to take that long to sell my property? Read the terms of business. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you're quite right. No, please, I welcome that. So that's pitfall number one. Pitfall number two is deliver overpricing. We've had two sellers in the live stream here admit that they were hoodwinked on price, that they were sold the lie.
They were had
a high price, and they regret it. So XR2828 was one of them, and I can't remember the name of the other. Stewie Louis, you just admitted it as well. So we've actually 3 sellers who admitted that they were taken in by overpricing. It's so important you don't let your agent overprice in this market, because it doesn't even help you. It only helps the estate agent to overprice your property to get you on their books rather than anyone else's. So don't do that. And then number 3, do not sign a long-term sole agency lock-in agreement. Make sure you don't make that mistake. And if you have made that mistake and your agent's not getting you any viewings, ask to be released. And if they say no, then say, well, I will publish every single day on social media that it's another day that you're keeping me locked into you without sending any buyers around. And they'll soon let you go, I think.
The other thing that you could consider doing is a rack rate commission, where if 2 agents say to you, yeah, if you really want to test the market, you could say, well, if two agents say to you that it's going to sell for X, and the other estate agent says it's X plus Y, then you could say, well, if you only achieve X, then we'll pay you a 0.5% commission. But if you get the plus Y, then we'll give you 5% of that extra, or something to that effect, so that that they're incentivized to try and get that higher price. Because I think that you'll find that most agents, if they don't believe what they're telling you, will back away from that. But much better, rather than go through those shenanigans, much better to not sign a sole agency agreement that lasts for definitely no more than 8 weeks, unless you're saying to them, I want to put the house onto the market for this amount of money, and that's the only occasion that I want to try that. If you're saying to them that it's got to go onto the market at that price because that's the price that I want, then a long-term agency agreement probably is appropriate under those circumstances.
So that's right. I could say if you as a seller are insisting on a higher price than the agent wants, that is when the agent is entitled to ask for a longer period of time.
I think so.
We've got an amazing thing to wrap up on here. It's an hour and a half now, so I'm going to wrap it up. But look at this. Barry, you've converted him, John. Despite my cynicism of estate agents, it must be said that John Durrant comes across as a thoroughly decent and personable chap. If he were still in the business, he would certainly get my business. And this is amazing. Thank you, Barry, for putting that, because this is the point I'm trying to get across. There are people who think that all agents are, to use your words, Barry, shiny suited secondhand car salesmen, not professionals. And that's not true. There are real professionals in this industry. John is one of them. Thank you, John, very, very much for coming. Thank you very much for your time and sharing it. If you want to find John, I've put his link. I've put the link to his LinkedIn profile in the description below here, but search for John Durrant on LinkedIn and you'll find him. And John is very, very generous with his time for people who need help. So please reach out to him if you'd like his help. To all the rest of you, to the 280 of you who are still watching live after an hour and a half, thanks for watching. Lots more to come. Tomorrow at clock, we've got the monthly mortgage market meeting where the two brokers that I work with will be joining me. We'll be discussing what's happening in the mortgage market. Hope you can make that. Otherwise, to all of you, especially to the sellers, don't overprice your property. Don't sign a long sole agency agreement, and choose your agent like your future depends on it, because it does. Thank you, guys. See you on the next video. Thank you again, John.
Okay, it was a pleasure.